Good to go? All righty. With that, I'll call the the regular assembly meeting to order. With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Mark,
He's excused.
Jeff,
Here.
David,
Here.
Scott,
Excused.
Donna. Here. Thomas,
Here.
Bob,
Here. With that, we have five members in the chambers. Two people excused. And with that, we'll move on to the voluntary pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. I have one set of minutes of the July 3rd, 2023 assembly meeting. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? With that, minutes stand approved as read or as presented. And then for amendments to the agenda, are there any amendments to tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing with that, I'll just have a roll, rather than a roll call, all those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? None. The agenda stands as is. Tonight, there are no public hearings on there. There are no bid awards. And that moves us on to persons to be heard related to tonight's agenda. Is there anybody who would like to talk to items related to tonight's agenda? Okay, come forward, state your name and who you represent, please.
Good evening. I'm Gary Alba and I'm here representing myself. I'm just here to express my support for resolution 2023-09. The resolution to use up to $100,000 from the property development fund to provide utility connections and stubs to residentially zoned lots for future sale. That money comes from the lots that have already been sold, and it's there to do just exactly that. And I was a part of identifying several like low hanging fruit kind of lots where utilities in some instances are only 50 feet away from the property line. If we could get that 50 feet, then you guys could auction off that property and you should make your money back. I can't imagine it being $100,000 to get 50 feet, but the only way we'll know is to do it. So we need to move forward. We need places to build and we need places for people to buy that have services and they want to be in town. We have people that want to move here. We need to provide places to build and build affordably. And I think we also discussed, I know we discussed, it's something that maybe you could, appropriate this money to the public works and they can schedule it in their yearly schedule of things to do and use the money from that fund to have their crew extend that and just have it a part of the borough business or put it out to bid to private contractors. But I think it can get done. And I think this is a great way to do it. There is a large amount of money in that fund and it's not doing anything right now. So I support it 100% and I think it can get done. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else who would like to talk to items related to tonight's agenda? Okay, is there anybody on the Zoom?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on then to persons to be heard unrelated to tonight's agenda. Is there anybody who would like to talk to items unrelated to tonight's agenda? Okay. I don't see anybody coming forward. Or is there anybody on the Zoom that would?
There is not.
Okay. With that, I'll close that part of the agenda and move on to boards, commission, committee reports. There are none under the consent agenda. There is none tonight. With that, I'll move to a report of other officers. Under report of other officers, The first item up tonight is Housing Needs Assessment Update. Assembly Member and Housing Task Force Chair Kensinger will update the Assembly on the Housing Needs Assessment Project. Member Kensinger.
Yes, I wanted to let everybody know that the consultants that are doing this project were very pleased with the number of responses, and thank you very much to everybody in the community that spent the time to filling out that survey. We got close to 370 responses. The thing that I was kind of concerned about was whether we'd get a good split on the demography of town. We didn't want to just have all old retired people like me filling out the survey. You know, we wanted to get a good cross section of the town, and the consultant has reported that we got pretty close to the numbers of young people in town. Us older folks are well represented, and people in the middle. So they're very pleased with the split. And what that does is it gives them a better idea on what the real needs of the community are. So they're fine tuning the data. We've been having bi-weekly meetings with them, and they've been updating us. And the next step is probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a meeting with the Housing Task Force, and they'll present the full findings. Right now, they're working on interviewing key people in town, and they want to get that done before they make any of the results official. The one thing that I can kind of share with you, there's a lot of very interesting things that are coming out of the survey. A lot of them were things that we all expected, some that I hadn't expected, but we'll wait for that for next month. But the one thing that they're pretty for sure of is we need to double the amount of housing that we're putting up every year. Basically 6 to 7 units. So like when the Voxstead got built, that's like 8 units. If you get a single house built, that's 1 unit. If you get a duplex built, it's 2 units. So right now we've been averaging over the last 10 years, 6 to 7 units a year, and we need closer to 13 to 14 a year. And that's, we need to start building more houses. The one thing that they were kind of perplexed by, and it's been shown in other communities, is where we're really lagging is in what we call remodel. In other words, houses that are old. There's a lot of housing stock in town that needs updating if it's going to be a house 20 to 30 years from now. Everybody knows how hard the climate is upon anything wood here. And there's nothing new there. There's a lot of things that we need to do. So hopefully by the end of August, early September, we'll have the final results, and they'll present that at one of our council meetings or assembly meetings, excuse me.
Thank you, Member Kensinger. Questions from the Assembly for Member Kensinger? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, I will move on to the Petersburg. Second item is Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department. Assembly Member Mucci will recognize Petersburg Fire Department staff and volunteers for their dedication to our community. Fire Chief Stopey and Fire EMS Director Hankins will also discuss how the public can help the department stay strong and viable. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, with the catastrophic fire we had here a week or so ago, I think it's important to recognize the volunteers and the paid staff that work for the fire department EMS group. And it was a pretty interesting example about how we pull together when things go haywire here in this town. You had people from the Coast Guard, Forest Service, the police department was very active in getting up there and evacuating kids from the Children's Center. While they were short-staffed throughout the process, they were able to manage the volunteers that they had. People showed up to offer relief and food. And one of the things that I had a question about, and I think Aaron and Chief Stolpe and others will talk about, is what the community can do to help out in a catastrophic fire like that if they're not part of the organization. And I've learned a lot in the last week and a half about what a person could do if they wanted to help out at the fire department during a catastrophic incident in town. So I just wanted to make sure that we formally recognize the fire department and all the volunteers that spend countless hours training and responding to fires and emergencies, health emergencies for folks and the search and rescue folks, but also to recognize the employees the employers who let their employees be part of the Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department and leave their job at a moment's notice to help in a fire or an emergency situation. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say thank you. I'm sure they've been thanked a lot, but I wanted to make sure that the borough as a whole, or the assembly as a whole, just said thank you and make sure that they're appreciated and know if there's anything else I can do or the borough assembly can do to make things better at the fire department. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Chief Stopey, I think you're in a, do you want to add any comments? And then I'll move it to Aaron if he,
I just would like to reiterate what Mr. Mucci had to say, that the volunteers did a great job, did the best they could. The cleanup afterwards is almost as tough as the initial situation. And we had great response from the community to come and help clean hose, put hose away. The Coast Guard came up and they're great manpower reserved to have at a moment's notice when they're in town. And so all the volunteers that showed up did their best. The community, that whether you brought a candy bar or a can of pop or a bottle of water, it was greatly appreciated. It was pretty hot. It was a little too hot to be wearing black gear standing next to a burning building. So my hat's off to those people that did that. My hat's off to the community as a whole. We definitely are shorthanded in a few areas. We're definitely long in the tooth in search and rescue people, shorthanded in the EMS and fire side. And on those sides, you don't necessarily have to be in the fire to be in the fire department. If you are claustrophobic, you don't have to put an air pack on. Just let us know. If you're afraid of heights, you don't have to climb a ladder, but you can pack it over there. If you're with the EMS people, you don't have to touch a patient. You can pack, you can load, you can drive the ambulance. There's other avenues of help within our organization that don't require you to do fire things. There are many other things, just like cleaning the hose. Oh my gosh, 3, 4, 5,000 feet of hose laid out. Bad enough the guys were there for 10 hours, then it's another 5 hours of cleaning hose. It pretty daunting, and then have to get up and go to work at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So just a big thank you to the community for supporting us when you can. And if the council is asking me what we need, 20, 30 million would be cool for a down payment. I mean, fire trucks are getting more expensive. The chief's driving his own truck. It's sad. It's sad. But thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we do appreciate the support from the community, definitely.
thank you. Appreciate that. I see Dave back there. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Well, just on behalf of the fire department, I reiterate everything that Jim has said. The community stepped up. The volunteers, I'll tell you, looking at a pile of hose and after, being there at 10 o'clock at night and thinking, well, now we got to clean up this mess. It was sure nice to have volunteers come forward and help out. So we appreciate that. And there are lots of places for volunteers in the community that could help out the fire department without a lot of training in areas of fire and EMS. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
Again, from the department side of the department head side of the things, thank you to the community for all the support. Some of the things that we have been trying to work on, and you heard about this early on in the beginning of the year, and it kind of got stagnant as we waited for a instructor to come, is the community emergency response teams. That is still a thing. The instructor will actually be in town doing that training. She gets in September 13th and will be training that Thursday and Friday and then over the weekend to try and get anyone that's interested in just general assistance to first responders. That's a great first step if you don't want to immediately join the fire department. Other things that can be done is, like has been mentioned before, bringing supplies, helping clean up afterwards. The last truck left the scene about 10:30 at night, and it was 12:30 before the last person left the building. And so it takes a lot of time to clean and put that stuff back away in such a manner that it's ready to go at a moment's notice. Employers that let employees leave at a moment's notice is also a big one. We've noticed that's becoming more of a problem in town as the labor pool in town seems to shrink and shrink. Employers really need to hold on to those employees more to continue to maintain their standards of business. And we do appreciate those who do make the allowance to let volunteers respond. Because at the end of the day, this is your guys' community volunteer fire department. We do live on an island. There is no one else that is going to come to help you. So who better to help you than your neighbors and friends and family? I don't really have anything else to add in that, other than if you are interested, please contact me or any of the officer leadership. If you're interested in the CERT program, see me. The station is open anytime for anyone who wants to walk in and just ask the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And I think I can talk for the assembly on this. It really was a community effort if you were around in town during that time. Because I got a call from the director there of the Children's Center thanking, much appreciative of helping move the sleeping kids out of that building. Very much appreciated. Any other comments from the assembly members before I move on? Okay, Member Mucci?
Yeah, just one more, and I know the answer, but I'd like to hear how many gallons of water did it take to fight that fire?
Carl had that exact figure. I heard he told one of my officers, but he didn't tell me directly.
It wasn't an exact figure, actually, but it was about 1.5 million gallons, we figured.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Member Marsh?
Yes, I would like to reiterate what has been spoken and commend the fire department and directors. Much appreciated, as well as the amazing volunteers in this town.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to move on here to the mayor's report. There's only one item on the mayor's report now, and that is the filing for candidacy for the October 3rd, 2023 municipal election. The filing period to run for the assembly, board or commission seat for the Petersburg Borough begins on Tuesday, July 25th and ends at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. Paperwork to file for candidacy will be available on the Borough website or at the clerk's office on July 25th, 2023. Please consider serving our community by running for one of the 20 seats up for election. Assembly, 2 seats, school board, 1 seat, hospital board, 3 seats, planning commission, 3 seats, harbor advisory board, 3 seats, library board, 3 seats, parks and recreation advisory board, 3 seats, and public service advisory board, 2 seats. For more information, contact Clerk Thompson at 907-772-5405 or by D. Thompson at petersburgak.gov. And with that, I'm going to move on. There is no manager's report tonight, and I'll move from there into unfinished business. First item under unfinished business is ordinance 2023-11, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 for the Petersburg Borough to rezone portions of the Airport Addition subdivision for the 13th Street relocation subdivision to public use, third and final reading. Do I have a motion to approve this? to
So
move
moved.
this?
Second,
Okay, it's been moved by member Mucci, seconded by member Kensinger. With that, discussion from the assembly. Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David.
yes,
Thank you.
Okay, with that, there's the member Marsh opposing, 4 members in support, and the motion passes. New business. Resolution 2023-09, a resolution to use up to $100,000 from the Property Development Fund to provide utility connection stubs to residentially zoned borough property lines to prepare the lots for future sale. If adopted, Resolution 2023-09 will authorize the borough to use up to $100,000 from the Property Development Fund to install utility connection stubs to borough-owned lots located at 1200 Lake Street, 200 Slide Street, and to parcel number 01.003.515 on Sandy Beach Road in preparation for future sale. Do I have a motion to approve the? Okay,
so move.
Second. Oh, go ahead.
okay. It's moved by member Kensinger, second by member Marsh. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The reason for this is I think Gary lined it out pretty correctly. This is kind of low hanging fruit. I know as an assembly, we looked at the costs of what it would cost to develop a lot of lots, specifically next to a couple of the existing subdivisions. Also in conjunction with developing some lots in conjunction with the pump station upgrade. I think we all got sticker shock. And, you know, the cost of putting in water and sewer and roads in those places far exceed the value of what you could reasonably expect to get out of the lots. So I don't see this as being money that we're not going to get back. The idea behind this is we put these lots up for sale, we spend the money that's necessary. And then when we sell these lots, then that money will come back into the Borough Property Development Fund. So I don't see this as a permanent withdrawal from that. I just consider this more as a loan from that fund so that we can start chipping away at our housing issue that we have here in town. The other thing that I think we have to look at as an assembly, since there's very few things that we can do as an assembly to deal with this problem, is we have to leave our minds open for some zoning changes on some parcels in the future. I think that's going to be really important for us moving forward if we want to tackle this problem.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments from the assembly? Member Marsh?
Thank you. Yes, I do have a question. Are these, so I understand the low hanging fruit, maybe the proximity to existing facilities, infrastructure. Are there specific people or entities interested in these parcels? And were these just the easiest of the selections available?
Basically, it was one of our recommendations from the Housing Task Force. Gary Albach, who's got quite a bit more knowledge of this than I do about what the demands are, since I'm not a builder like he is. No, you're correct. There's nobody that's saying, no, I want to buy one of these lots. So yes, it's speculation, if you want to put it that way.
Member Fine Walsh?
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to my question. I'm kind of curious what the plan is for the lots, if we have a plan, or I mean, would the next step then be to sell them? And would that be via auction like it has been in the past, or is this something that we're planning to talk about in the future?
Through the mayor. There's a process outlined in code on how we have to dispose of lots. So the assembly has some choices, but primarily it's a open auction.
Yeah, just put them up for
So once the
auction.
lots are prepped and ready to go, we come back to the assembly to schedule an auction. We advertise that, people bid on it, and highest bid gets it. Gets them, I should say. You know, and each lot is auctioned individually.
And
Member Kinsinger.
I believe we have a little bit of leeway in determining. I mean, when we put them up for auction, we're not going to sell them for $1. I mean, we can put them up with a reserve price of whatever our development costs are, plus a little bit more, if that's our wish.
Through the mayor, yeah, there are actually some rules on what those prices have to be. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. As part of this discussion, how do we determine who does the work? Is,
I'm gonna jump in and then ask Chris to possibly speak to this. Our public works crew is very good, but they're really a maintenance crew. They're not a construction crew. We have a couple of contractors here on the island that do a lot of this kind of work for us. You know, Chris and I will talk about it, but in all likelihood, we'll talk to them about potentially giving us a bid to do the work. It'll be faster and probably, you know, in some cases, maybe even cheaper than it would cost us to do it ourselves. Again, because they do a lot of this and they're good at it. So, but that's a conversation we'll have internally to see what those prices are. If they come back, if we get really bad bids, then potentially we say no and we do it ourselves.
right, thank you.
Thank you. Member Fine.
And so we mentioned earlier, then the money proceeds from the sale would then just go directly back into the property development fund. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, the money that goes into the property development fund comes from a couple of places. So some of it is general fund overages. So at the end of the year, if the general fund does better than expected, half that overage goes into the property development fund. That was a decision the assembly made. How many years ago, Jody? A few?
Yeah, a few, but they approve it every year in the budget policies.
So that's one point. And additionally, when we sell property, the money goes back into the property development fund, like you've heard. So it's a combination of things that goes back in and replenishes that fund. In a perfect world, we could just keep doing this over and over again and getting what the lots cost us. You know.
Could I follow up to that then? I mean, if we're tied into this, I mean, it's good that we're getting our money back, but you know, at the same time, the last time we auctioned off a piece of property, it sold for a pretty astronomical sum. And I sort of wonder, I know some of these properties are in fairly desirable locations. I don't know if that's true of all of them, but I mean, they're all great properties, but you know, I wonder if it's worth considering that before we jump to selling these, you know, especially if we're going to invest public money in developing these properties. I think that's a great thing to do. And it's, you know, it's a moot point. We're getting the money back, but at the same time, investing public money, you know, to develop a property and then turn around and sell it for several $100,000 would be like, it doesn't seem like you know, I think we could do a little better than that. So it makes me a little nervous putting these up for auction after doing this. I'd like to talk about that before we get there. But as far as the immediate action, I totally support this. I think it is a great, like people said, low hanging fruit, good to do.
Member Meucci.
Yeah, one last question. What's the balance in the property development fund?
Yeah.
For $95,000.
Member Kinsinger.
And I'd like to point out the way that the ordinance, or excuse me, the resolution is worded. We don't have to spend $100,000. We're just trying to start a process. And if it turns out that it's too hard to do, then there's nothing that says that it has to be done. We just, at some point, we got to start making a step for whittling away at this problem. And in response to Member Walsh's concern, there is a number of things that we can do. Programs to explore. You know, one of the things that I feel that we have a need for is we need land available for entry-level people, first-time home buyers. And we could set up a program like that. But that would take quite a bit of work on our part. It would require extensive changes of ordinances, and we'd have to figure out how we're going to manage a program like that. I think that would be a good idea, but I think it's something that we need to have a discussion amongst ourselves, ideally in a work session sometime, perhaps when the housing needs assessment comes out. We could look further down that road if we want to set up some different type of program than just, as you said, just taking these lots out and sell them to the highest bidder, but that's a discussion for another day.
Through the mayor, if I may, to some extent, the assembly's even done further work on this you're not giving yourself credit for. For example, the conversation that you just had recently with PIA on those properties, you know, multifamily over there on 8th Street. That's exactly what Assemblymember Kinzer is talking about. And you have done some work in that area. This is more single family lots. But it's going to take all of that from what I can tell from that, you know, housing assessment to make this work.
Questions, Member Mucci?
Yeah, you know, like it's been originally, we talked about this, it's not gonna be one big solution that's gonna solve this housing. It's gonna be lots of little things, and between working with community organizations like PIA and this resolution that we're talking about, I mean, just little things chipping away on it. I was at a hospital board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about possibly doing something for additional housing for their folks and maybe freeing up some of the 13 apartments that they have available. So those things, you know, there's conversation going, we're having conversations, or there's conversations going with some of the road builders in town about possibly a manufactured home park somewhere. And you know, the conversation's out there, and that's how we'll kind of work at solving this issue. And yeah, I'm very supportive of this, and I want to thank Dave for bringing it forward.
Hey, Member Marsh?
Thank you. I am wondering if there is a theoretical timeline that people have in mind to either A, get this going or complete.
Wow. Sorry. Through the mayor. No, not theoretical. Yes, I can give you theoretical. Based on what we're dealing with this summer, having our crew do this would be probably pretty difficult and have it done by fall. Chris, jump in if I say that anything wrong, please. And I don't really know the workload for Ruck and Road and Reed Brothers right now. I think both of them have some big projects that are underway, including some housing related stuff. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to get something done this summer or this becomes a springtime project. I just don't know. Chris, did I misspeak?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
I would say if there's any hope of getting something done this year, it would probably have to come from a, you know, private enterprise. Our crew is fully committed for the season.
I have a follow-up question now that was raised here, related to the planning and zoning. If what's the process going forward? If this is approved tonight, there's one of the small lots that was identified has, I believe, a piece of that could a right of way that could be done away with to make that lot bigger. 1, 2, what other plan, and all these would have to go back to planning and zoning. There's a follow-up question to this for approval.
Mayor, any changes to, you know, removing right of ways or splitting lots and stuff will have to involve P&Z on that. And so then you've got some meetings that have to be coordinated for that. And I don't know the specifics on this group. I think the Sandy Beach lot we talked about potentially it may be big enough to be 2 lots if cut the right way. But that takes some work with P&Z. The others I'm not sure about.
And in that case, on the lot on Sandy Beach, there could be even more lots available. Could be.
That is absolute gossip at this point. I have not looked at it or talked to Liz, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there has to be a process to go forward.
If this passes, we'll take a hard look at all of those to make sure that we maximize the value of those lots from the standpoint of getting them on the market and getting them ready for being on the market.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before I call for the vote? Okay, clerk, would you please call roll?
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Okay, it passes with a unanimous five folks voting for it. And with that, I'm going to move on then to solid waste contract proposal. The borough's solid waste contract with Republic Services expires on August 31st, 2023. Public Works Director Cotter received 2 quotes to provide the borough with solid waste transport and disposal with the most affordable quote coming from Republic Services as a 2-year renewal of the existing agreement at a cost of $172.86 per ton for the first year. And with that, Director Cotta recommends moving forward with a 2-year renewal with an optional 3rd year at the borough's discretion. Do I have a motion to,
So move.
okay,
Second.
okay. Been motioned by Member Mucci, seconded by Member March. With that discussion there, questions for Director Cotter or the Borough? Okay, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. With this new contract, if it passes and the increased rates, are we looking at a rate increase for our garbage rates in town?
Would say that's likely. It's not a sure thing. We've had quite a bit of additional revenue come into the department in the last year beyond what was budgeted, and we're not sure if that's a one-off thing or if it's a trend. So we're gonna have to look at that. But as of right now, department reserves are healthy. I think Jody told me we had 500,000 in reserves. And our revenues have been up. So there's no urgent need at the moment to raise rates, but certainly we'll be looking at that throughout the year, especially as we start getting these bigger invoices for bale disposal. And I would anticipate a rate increase discussion next budget cycle.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Member Marsh.
With this renewal of the contract, if this passes, would there be a difference in the operations of the collection and how waste is handled? Or is it pretty much status quo, just renewing the contract for another 2 years?
It would be status quo, just renewing the contract. It's the same company, the same process. Although because of the sharp increase in cost, we are going to be taking a look at disposal options, in the near future. Probably talking with other nearby communities, but also talking with the Southeast Alaska Solid Waste Authority about ways to offset some of that cost or reduce some of that cost if possible, because it's impacting everybody, not just us.
Member Kensinger.
The one thing that I saw that was kind of concerning was we have to provide our own containers if we renew this contract. That's going to be rather expensive, I would assume.
Yes, very. And we have a minimum 2 years, maybe 3 to, figure out if that is part of a future scenario. That's what they're telling us right now. That's also what they are telling other communities. Wrangell, for instance, they just did a renewal with Republic and the terms were very similar to what we were offered. An investment in a container fleet would be significant. Possibly include acquiring chassis as well. So that's a large capital investment. Then you have O&M for those items also. So that's pretty concerning and is also something we're going to be taking a really close look at in the near future.
So we have 2 years to figure this out.
Yeah. This contract is a 2 years with an optional 3rd year, which is at the borough's discretion. So we could go 3 years if we feel like this is the best deal we can get after 2. We'll just have to see where we are at that point.
Yes, so my understanding from what you're telling me is, okay, 2 years, provide our own containers, 1 year extension. And is SICA also involved with Republic as well, or do they have a different contract?
They are with Republic and they're on a longer term contract. I don't think there's renews for several years yet. Ketchikan, I think, is 2 years out. Wrangell has the same contract term as we do. So 2 years from now, Wrangell, Ketchikan, and Petersburg will all kind of be in alignment as far as expiration of contracts. And so there would be an opportunity at that point for you know, the three communities, maybe other communities as well, to negotiate something on a joint contract basis, or, you know, working through the CSWA, we might be able to do something regionally, but it's definitely a concern we're gonna have to work on actively, because, you know, 2 years sounds like a long time. It's not. It'll be over with before you know it.
Member Mute.
Yeah, thank you. So we talked about the container fleet. Are we talking about different types of sanitation trucks and or different types of garbage cans, or just, I was a little confused.
No, what they're saying with this contract renewal is that we would have to acquire our own shipping containers, which are currently owned by Republic. Alaska Marine Lines owns the chassis that they're transited on, and Republic Services owns the containers themselves. But what they're saying is that we would have to provide our own containers, and with the interval it takes to fill a container, ship it, unload it, ship it back, you know, you're talking about quite a few containers to be able to have a reliable stream of containers.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, with that, the clerk, please call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Thank you.
That passes it unanimously. I'll move on to department head longevity pay. The Assembly recently approved a new collective bargaining agreement with the borough's largest union, the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association. The new CBA includes a longevity pay schedule for employees to encourage continued employment in order to keep valuable institutional knowledge gained over time, which is advantageous to the borough, and to keep employees' wages competitive with the job market. The longevity pay schedule is accrued as a varying percentage increase for every 4 years of continuous uninterrupted employment for 20 years, then every 5 years to 30 years, where longevity pay is kept. The longevity pay schedule is, and I'll just go through it. It's 4, 8, 12, 16 years, with the first 4, 8, 12 is a 3% increase each of those 4 years. The 16, 20 is a 4% increase. The 25 and 30 is a 5% increase. The borough would like to apply the same longevity schedule to its 14 department heads at a cost of approximately $139,000 and request Assembly approval to do so. Do I have a motion to consider this?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Kensinger. Discussion. Member Marsh.
Yes, I took the opportunity and contacted some communities outside of Petersburg on how they handle their department heads. And step increases seem to be a common theme. But also for department heads, market value, market demand, keeping competitive in that specific realm of whatever the department heads are, whether it's public works or library or however. So I'm not thinking this is as reasonable as on the outset it seems. I also understand that whereas we have been most fortunate to have people in Petersburg who have been here for decades, some of them, and have given exceptional service in their professions, which are much appreciated. I am reluctant to support this because I think perhaps looking across Southeast, there are some huge gaps that perhaps need to be ironed out before we jump into a just longevity. What is the market demand that's in, Sitka or Skagway or Wrangell or wherever? So I think some of these are not as reasonable as they would seem. So I'm hesitant to support this.
Thank you. Other questions from Assembly members? Member Mucci.
Thank you. I have a question about the terminology, in under the spreadsheet that we have, it looks, if he goes across the top, name, department, and it's classified as current salary. And when we went through the union contract, we settled on a term base pay. I know what the dictionary says those two things are, but what's the difference between our PMEA contract with the base pay and this department head current salary? Shouldn't they be kind of the same thing?
Through the mayor. They are different in some ways because department heads don't get standby pay and on-call time and overtime, whereas PMEA employees, hourly employees do. So when we talk about current salary for department heads, that's what they make. That's their salary. You could use the same terminology with PMEA, and their current salary would include all those things I just mentioned, which is add-ons to what their salary is. Department heads don't get those.
All right, thank you.
I'll ask a follow-up question to the clerk. Could you do a comparison for us between what's proposed here and what we just agreed to with PMA on longevity?
Sure. So with PMEA, because they're paid hourly, we agreed with the union, the borough and the union came to an agreement on a starting wage, a competitive starting wage for every position that the borough has. And so when we agreed to the longevity bonuses, not bonuses, but the longevity pay, we agreed that we would take that starting wage that was agreed to between the union and the borough and add longevity to that wage rather than the wage that the employee is currently making. Because some positions, as we know, were being paid under market and some positions were doing pretty good. So not all positions in their hourly pay, what they're getting right now, were below market value. So it made sense to the union and to the borough to take that agreed to starting wage, which is a competitive wage for every position, and then look at the employee that's in that position. How many years have they been with the borough? Add that longevity onto that starting wage. And then that would determine their new rate. There were some employees in the union whose wages were high enough that they were already competitive. So when we took the agreed to starting wage for the position and we added their longevity to it, it didn't change a whole lot. It might have been a 1% increase or a 2% increase. And in that case, we agreed with the union that no one would get less than a 3% increase to their current wage. So there were some employees, that we didn't use the starting wage and add longevity because it didn't get them up to that 3%. And in that case, we just took the current wage they're making, we added 3% to it, and that was their wage effective July 1. And then going forward, as they hit their longevity steps, they'll get whatever percentage increase hits that longevity step. With the department heads, there isn't an hourly rate. There isn't a base pay. It's a salary that's an annual salary that gets divided between 24 pay periods, basically. So we don't have that base pay to add the longevity to. Another thing I'd like to point out, if I could, every time we've had to replace a department head over the last few years, we have to pay the new incoming department head more money than the outgoing department head made when they left, because that's the market conditions. So.
Other questions, Member Kensington, and I'll come back.
Yes, I think we've been getting a good deal with some of our department heads. I think my understanding is that if we were to go out and replace like some of our key positions, it would end up costing us a lot more money than what we're paying now. And I think just in the interest of continuity and not having a high turnover rate, particularly amongst our department heads, this makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm glad we're doing it now. I think it should have been done earlier.
Member Fine Walsh, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I you know, just it's Yeah, so if I understand correctly, then under the negotiated contract with employees, then that longevity pay bump is applied to the starting salary for that position, whereas here we're talking about the current salaries for everyone. You know, and you know, some borough employees have reached out to me too with some consternation here, and you know, I think it's definitely, it's unfortunate that some employees are only getting a 3% bump under the agreement. Which, you know, I mean, under current conditions with inflation, everything, that's pretty small. And, you know, in retrospect, I sort of wish that the assembly had approached these negotiations somewhat differently. I wonder if it would have been beneficial for union representatives to address the assembly at some point and just kind of brief everyone on what the union position was and what their goals in negotiation were. So we had some idea of kind of what they were trying to get and, you know, kind of compare that to what was ultimately in the contract. Because, you know, from what I've been hearing, there wasn't exactly consensus on the union side. There were a lot of people that were unhappy with you know, the decision that admittedly their representative agreed to. You know, and it was difficult, you know, the way we handled it, that agreement was presented to the assembly at a point when it had already been agreed to by all sides, which, you know, nobody wants to blow up an agreement at that point. So it's really not creating a situation that's you know, conducive to addressing some of those more minute concerns, because, you know, at that point, who wants to, you know, is people, as you explained, work so hard to arrive at these negotiated agreements, and it's not easy. But, you know, that said, I think it would be worth looking into changing this process a little bit and maybe getting the union a little bit more input, you know, at the onset. That's and I will conclude, you know, I think despite that, I still fully support this, because I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a zero sum game. Everybody here, we're really struggling to keep pay competitive, and even with these increases contemplated here today, I think a lot of these positions, when you compare them to neighboring communities, are still underpaid, and that's a big problem. I mean, we have incredible talent in this community, and we risk losing it, you know, and that would really not be great. So I think we need to continue doing this. I think this is a good start. I feel like you know, revisiting employee salaries and wages is always a good idea.
Member Marsh.
Yes, thank you. So a couple of points is one of the communities that I got information from, and I'm just going to point this one out. The head librarian, the department head, was making almost half of what we're paying Petersburg. So that was probably the low end. And I would say for that particular department head salary, that is to me more representative of something like Boise or Spokane, or, you know, some of these other very large communities where they've got a ton on their plate. And I'm not saying our department head at the library doesn't have a ton on their plate, but I just wonder if maybe we're overpriced on that one. On the same, and another point is that it seems like, if I remember correctly, our discussion that sometime earlier this year, department heads got a raise. And so now these new increases are based on the new wage after the raise. So my question would be, did all the department heads receive the same percentage of the increase in their wages? And if that were the case, then maybe some of this would make sense. But if it wasn't the case, then I think we probably should iron out a few more wrinkles.
So lots of stuff. So through the mayor, start off with Tara, the librarian. She's also our web person. So she handles all the web updates and basically the modifications to our website. And, you know, she's also been here a very long time. So again, when you look at what the department head, what we're putting forward for that, a lot of it's longevity based. So people who've been here for a longer period of time are getting a bigger boost than somebody that's only been here a year or two in that position. Biggest challenge we have is finding good people across the board. It hourly employees as well as department heads. When we go to do a department head recruitment, we compare our salaries to other cities of similar size, and we try to pick cities that are both slightly smaller and slightly bigger. We don't compare ourselves to Ketchikan, Juneau, Anchorage, Sitka. We'll look at what they're paying, because sometimes with department heads, you can lose them to bigger cities. But as a general rule, we try to look at what Wrangell's paying and Craig and help me out, whatever it is, Haynes, Cordova. Those are kind of the communities similar in size. And it's hard. Alaska doesn't have a lot of choices. There's not a lot of cities to throw into that mix. And again, as Debbie noted, we find that increasingly when we go to recruit, we're paying more for the incoming department head than we paid for. And otherwise we get no applicants. I mean, Debbie, I mean, like adding, am I missing anything that?
No.
So we could, again, I don't know how to describe it. You know, we saw this when we recruited Aaron's position. I mean, he's sitting in the room, so I can pick on him. We ran ads for months and got very limited, and we just kept raising the salary, and we never really did get great applicants for it until we got Aaron. And we went through an interview process with Aaron, and I made a deal with Aaron about his salary that, you know, was going to be set at one number, and we'd increase it basically when he accomplished a few things. He's already accomplished all of those, and I raised his salary again. So when we go back to the increases that you asked about other department heads, they weren't all the same. Averaged about 4%, but there were certain department heads that I paid a lot more to because we were in danger of losing them, or at least seriously, you know, taking advantage of some positions that were highly underpaid. So there were 3, I think, department heads who got more than the 4%. I think all the rest got a 4%. What we're seeing already, though, during this process was that we're still way out of there. I mean, using some examples that Bob gave me, the current CEO for SEPA, which probably in my opinion has less of a tough job than Carl does, they just hired him at $262,000. They've been advertising finance directors and city managers all over the state for smaller cities in Petersburg at higher wages than we're paying. We're seeing increases in police chief wages. We're seeing increases in public works, almost across the board. And that's what it becomes an assembly level decision, which is why we bring this to you. I highly recommend this, but that being said, the assembly has to make the call. You know, if you want really quality, high, well done department heads that know their job, we're going to have to pay higher. And this is a step in that direction. It does not mean that I want that, a couple of years from now, I'm not coming back saying, wow, the finance directors in the state are going up even more. And we're going to have to talk about it. That's the nature of what we're seeing right now. We've had wage inflation across the board in the borough right now for the last year or two. And we did not do a great job keeping up with it. So anyway.
And Marsh.
Follow up. Thank you. So would you say in your opinion that all 14 department heads are making competitive rate salaries? Are there some that should be bumped up more?
Probably, yes.
Okay, and what can we do to remedy that?
Let me put this in place, and then we evaluate things based on what do I hear? I mean, I've in some ways I've made it part of the department head's challenge. I said, go get me comparables, go talk to some of these other communities and talk to them about their job as compared to your job, and bring that back to me so we can have a conversation. I did that with Liz and Jody both. Tell me what you're finding out of the market and who you're getting it from, and what cities are similar to Petersburg. it helps us to try to get that data, and then we take a look at it. The other challenge is none of that includes tenure, which this kind of hope this fixes some of that tenure issue. I don't know. I mean, if inflation keeps doing what it's doing with wages, this won't even fix it. But at a certain point, we'll reach a point where we can't keep throwing money at it. People have to make decisions. I mean, my feeling is, but the assembly has to drive this, is that we want to be competitive. We don't have to be the highest payer in the state. People have to want to live here. And if it's just for the money, they're not going to be happy in the long run anyway. So, we want to find people that like it here, and we want to pay them appropriately. And if they get a job offer to go work for Anchorage as, the chief of police or something, we have a party for them and wish them well, and off they go, because we're not going to compete with them. But I think we have to do a better job doing what we can do. And I think this is a step in that right direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my perspective,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, like Steve said, we just have to be competitive. And we've been wrestling this for the last couple of years. We started off with the police department and the dispatchers, trying to get some stability down there, and it's kind of helped a little bit. And we know that we've got some guys at Power and Light who are leaving because the wages there aren't competitive. They can leave and go south and I'll make more money. And I think that's one of Steve's toughest jobs, is making things competitive, whether it's a hiring bonus or a moving bonus, or we have to be competitive, because we're not just competing with just communities in Southeast, but down south. I mean, cost of living is a little cheaper down south than, but yeah, you want to have to live here, and those of us who do enjoy it, and just for some other folks, it might not be it.
Through the mayor, I mean, we'll talk about it. It's pretty common. We're running a job for a journeyman lineman right now. And we started off offering $49 per hour, plus a $15,000 hiring bonus and $15,000 in relocation. Unless something's changed, we have not found a single qualified applicant. Correct, Carl? Yeah. So Carl's group did some really good surveys for us talking about journeyman linemen just in Alaska. And we also looked at just what kind of dropped in our laps. California is paying $70 an hour. Now we're going to try to compete with them. And throughout Alaska, averages is probably closer to 60, kind of 58 to 60 range. We're not going to get anybody to apply for our lineman job if we're offering $49. That's an example. I mean, at $61 an hour, the line, actually less than that, with overtime and the other perks, the linemen are making more than Carl, making more than me. And we're gonna have to take a hard look at that. How do we pay our Power and Light folks to stay competitive? Because they can go anywhere in Alaska. Again, I don't want to compete with Anchorage or Chugach Electric or any of the big players, or PG&E in California. But we're gonna look, I mean, Kodiak lost 3 journeyman linemen all to Port Angeles at the same time. They can't have a hell of a lot more than 3 linemen. I mean, so clearly people from Alaska will move south if the job offer is right. And I don't know what that job offer was, but it was probably, $60, $65 an hour, which is significantly more than we're currently paying. So, and this is not a surprise to our own. I mean, we've had meetings with IBEW, and we're continuing to talk about that. It's a challenge. And it hits department heads as well as some of these positions. So, anyway.
Other questions? Yeah, I'd like to chime in there just a little bit. I just finished negotiating salary for new CEO. The salaries for that same position in the state of Alaska range from, this is the lowest paid, started about 235,000. When you went to Kodiak Electric, it was 485,000, I think it was. And so everything in between for that kind of a position. If you were trying to fill, we're looking right now to fill an assistant Carl. And I think that'll be a very good indication of what the market will bear here very quickly. And I can tell you right now, we're not at all competitive with Ketchikan. with what their individual that has Carl's position in Ketchikan makes. With that, unless there are other questions, would the clerk please call the roll on the department head longevity pay?
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Donna,
No,
Thomas,
Yes.
That motion passes with a 4-1 with member Marsh opposing. And with that, I'll move on. Communications, there's communications in the package that have been received from since June 29, 2023. And the last on the agenda here, assembly discussion items. One of the items we talked about at the last meeting was the Petersburg seaplane float. And we asked that be put back on the agenda for discussion. And with that, Manager Gishbrook, I'll let you start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this started because one of your members mentioned to me that the seaplane float was sinking, and have we talked to the state about, are they willing to come fix it? So I reached out to the state. They're not willing to come fix it. Although they are willing to talk, they'd love to give it to us, which seems to be the state's approach to things that they don't want to fix. They just want to give it away. So I've had a couple of meetings with Scott and Glow. We've talked to Alan Murph. At some point when we have ideas, we may come back to the assembly about, doing some kind of a walkthrough so we could identify exactly all the things that are wrong. So we have an idea what it looks like, so we can talk to the assembly in a little more educated perspective. I'm not sure we want to own it and take on the maintenance that it would require. But it's interesting. FAA will pay for an awful lot of the repairs there. It's viewed as an airport. And so I'm not sure why the state has not accessed those kind of funds. It's a very small facility, and maybe the state just doesn't have the resources to do that. So we're continuing to work on it internally. We may bring stuff back to the assembly at some point to talk about, but it is a valuable part of our harbor and some of the businesses. So it is, I think it's another example of the state kind of not holding up their end of the bargain. I will likely put something, if I can get some numbers on our next year's capital budget for the assembly to approve, to say, hey, this should be on our list. And it should be something we should be talking with our senator and representative about. Hey, the state owns this. Why aren't they fixing it? Anyway, I think it's important for the assembly to know that, and that we're going to keep pushing unless you guys decide we shouldn't. So.
Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you. So when we're talking about the seaplane float, we're just talking about the structure that the planes sit on? Or are we talking the hangar and all the way down to the end?
So it's the floats that the planes can pull up on. The hangars are actually owned by individuals, but they lease space from the state. And then you have the transfer bridge that goes down. So all of that is state property. And the state makes money on it. Scott can probably give you a number when he's here. They lease him space for having a hangar there. And others as well. He's not the only one that rents space there. So.
Right. Thank you.
Do you have any idea of the use we get there? And or does the state charge for just, mooring your boat or putting your boat there or your plane there?
I don't know all the rules. That's one of the things I'd like to understand. They do lease space. So if you have a space, down at the end, you have ramps that you lease that, and then you pay the state a certain amount of money that allows you to pull up there. What that dollar amount is, I don't know. That's one of the things the state's sales tool was, hey, if you guys owned it, you could set those rates any way you want. Well, why doesn't the state raise them? And anyway, that's kind of their push. Again, it falls into a lot, just like what we're talking about with Banana Point. And we're talking about Papke's, state-owned facilities that are having some issues. And then I think we need to hold the state as accountable as we possibly can. In some cases, they're not going to do it, and it may be all of these cases, and then the assembly is going to have to decide. If we get to that point, what do you want to do? I mean, do we want to basically walk away and just let it come apart? If it's important enough, do we want to try to find a way to get money, grant money to fix it? Those are going to be decisions that are going to have to be made down a while from now. But
Are you also looking at liabilities associated with that?
I don't understand how the state gets away with it, to be honest with you. I would think they would have some liability if a piling broke while somebody's plane was sitting there. But they don't seem to care. And I think I overheard a conversation earlier before the meeting with, between Dave and Bob talking about Papke's again. It's a liability waiting to happen. And I don't think the state has a care in the world about it.
Thank you. Other questions? Member Fine-Wash?
So in the seaplane dock, is that on borough leased land or is that, no?
State owned.
State owned, okay,
Yeah.
so we'd be in the same situations with Pappy's where we're trying to transfer state real estate. State-owned real
Yeah,
estate.
I mean,
Okay,
the seaplane float, because it is managed by a group in ADOT that's different than the people who manage the roads. They're the airport group. And they have authority to do certain things that is different than people that manage the roads. What they can do and not do, I don't know yet. I'm still early in this learning curve. I've had 2 conversations on the phone with this gal, and they're basically hey, the first thing out of their mouths was, is the borough interested in taking this? I mean, no, I mean, not unless I know, if the state wants to fix it, maybe. I mean, Glow is very interested in it because all those tidelands could be used for lots of different things, not just a seaplane float. But we have to have a seaplane float. Otherwise, we put people out of business that are doing flight seeing and other things in this community that bring in revenue. So there's a lot to learn about it. Maybe there's a way to make money at it that would be worth the borough's time, but I can't answer that right now.
Does the state have a value on this seaplane float? And my one question is, so the ones that the float planes tie up to, but does it take that leg out towards the Narrows as well? Is that part of the seaplane float, or is it just the primary one?
I think it's just the primary.
This
I think I have not seen any of these
Okay.
leases.
Yes. So then my question is there a value attached to this?
Not currently, because they don't pay taxes, they're tax exempt. So I don't think they bother appraising it, but that's one thing we would love to know at some point, if we can find the money, would be what it would take to fix it. So that starts to establish a value. If it's going to be $3 million to fix it, you kind of have an idea what it costs, and can you make money on that? We have to see what these leases look like. FAA will pay for a lot. Why the state's not using FAA, I don't understand. I mean, there's probably a reason. That's another thing we need to learn about, because that is considered an airport property. It can be funded by FAA money. So potentially the state just doesn't care. And if the borough had it, we would be able to write grants to get FAA money, but I don't know that yet.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I just wanted the assembly to be aware.
I think,
by the way, it's not something that was on my radar until
Right.
Scott brought it up.
I think it was good to have a discussion, just bring us all up to date on where we're at, the issue related to it. With that, then, I'm going to move on to item B, which is high school scholarship program for trades. Manager Giesbrick has contemplated a scholarship program subsidized by the borough for high school students wanting to attend a trade school and return to Petersburg to work in the trade for which they were trained. Petersburg is short on plumbers, contractors, electricians, etc., and the scholarship program may help rectify the issue. Manager Giesbrick.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I've had 2 conversations with the director of Avtech in Seward, just to say hello, introduce myself. And does anybody else do this? The answer is yes. There are actually a couple of cities, boroughs that have programs with Avtech. So it sounds like they've got something set up to work, do some of the administrative work that might be necessary. I want to continue having those conversations. I don't have a proposal for the assembly yet. At some point, I will do that if the assembly's is interested in getting something like that from me. I think we hear throughout town that the limiting factor in a lot of things is lack of tradesmen in various parts of the community. It'd be great to be a little more proactive at trying to fix that. I know PEDC is working on something as well, because some of our businesses are heavily impacted by not being able to get qualified employees. I'm not sure what this would look like. I clearly want to talk to Avtech. They are willing to share what some of these other cities are doing. And we've got a meeting scheduled this afternoon or this week, excuse me, to talk about it and see what our other communities doing. One of my concerns is I don't want to give money. I guess I'm being stingy. I don't want to give money away and then have the people not come back to Petersburg to work. So if I want some kind of way to offer, let's say a high school kid, a scholarship that where we make it helpful to them, but then if they come back to Petersburg, we pay the tuition fee or some version of that. And limit it to those trades that we're seeing where we have big needs. And Avtech has a neat program. They have culinary arts as an example. We see that here in town, that, you know, it doesn't have to be, all the rest of their stuff is more hardcore trades, heavy equipment, diesel mechanic, refrigeration, electronics. All that would be very helpful to a lot of businesses here in town. Culinary arts surprised me. That would as well. I mean, I think Mindy at Salty Pantry has been running an ad for how long now for a kitchen manager? I mean, I can't find anybody. I mean, so I think there are useful items that Avtech does that could potentially help the community if we could find a way to get Petersburg folks to go get and then come back to town and find a job. I just don't know how to configure that quite yet, but sounds like Avtech's willing to be helpful and talk about it, and it's not wasting any money other than my time to talk to them. So I'd like to keep working on that. And I would plan on bringing something back to the assembly at some point when I have more information to share.
Questions? Member Mucci?
Thank you. No, I think it's a great idea. You know, we see it over at Power and Light where we've got a couple of apprentices going through the program and we're kind of growing our own. It'd be nice to have something halfway fleshed out between now and the end of the year so that we can involve the school in the conversation and get them to really push hard on this too, because I think it's a win-win situation for the community. If we have some local kids out there interested, it doesn't have to be just kids either, maybe young adults who
Absolutely.
are just wandering around looking for something to do, and this would be a good career path for folks. So there's several people in town who are working for trades that grew up here and seem to have found a fit. So yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in for this program. So yeah, anything I can do, let me know.
I don't know what it looks like yet. I'm going to be very open to the assembly. This is based on, you know, a crazy idea of mine and two conversations with this gal that's the director.
Yeah.
So
great.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate my support. You know, I'm really, I know PDC has been talking about this and you've been at a lot of those meetings and this has been on your radar for a while. So it's great to hear there's been some, you know, some interest and that sounds like a real possibility with Avtech. I was encouraged to hear earlier today, employee at PMC talking about a scholarship program they had. You know, it sounds obviously it worked out pretty well, and it sounds, you know, really similar to kind of what we're talking about here, where you know, the financial assistance on the part of the borough is sort of conditional on, you know, the agreement to stay here for a certain period of time. You know, I think that's something, you know, I really think it's important to avoid a situation where you're putting borough administration in a position, you know, to go and you know, collect a debt or something from someone. That would be terrible. And it's not really what we're trying to do. And it's also interesting. I'm like, should we be looking at scholarship for graduate programs? Frankly, given the discussions we've just been having, you know, it'd be really helpful to have some civil engineers and in a couple other positions as well. So yeah, I think this idea really has some legs.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
putting
you.
that on the
I
agenda.
will continue on and bring stuff back when appropriate.
I'll move on then. Assembly member comments. Does any assembly member have comments? Okay, I'll move on then to recognitions. Member Mucci.
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, thank members of the volunteer fire department and everybody who showed up, who wasn't a member of the volunteer fire department, and the borough employees that were monitoring the water situation up there. I think I've learned a lot about how they fight a fire in the last couple of weeks, and there were a lot of people involved to make that thing happen. And I would strongly urge people who are interested in helping the fire department or becoming a volunteer to talk to Chief Stolpe or a member of the volunteer fire department, or get a hold of Aaron and chat about what they can do. I think that community emergency response team training in September would give folks a good introduction to what they can do without becoming a full-fledged EMT or firefighter. And I think it's a great program, and I just wanted to make sure that they knew from me that I was very thankful for all the work they do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Other comments? With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, adjourned.